Very good afternoon to you from the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt. This is ATN International News for today. To begin, let's take a look at the headlines. Senegal president faces budget challenge after parliamentary win. Chiro defeats incumbent in presidential election. Ramaphosa calls for safe recovery of illegal miners. USDA confirms bird flu in Hawaii. 3 officers withdrawn from peacekeeping mission in Argentina. South Korea authorities launches probe into car test incident. Mass production of mobile bomb shelters begins. These and more stories to come your way in a moment. Do stay with us. Pastave on its win. Former Prime Minister Amadou Ba, who ran against fire in the presidential election, also conceded defeat, as did other opposition leaders. Senegal's sovereign debt rose in price on Monday. TradeWeb data showed, while most other African nations' bonds lost ground. The yield on its 2033 bond was down about 10 basis points by 1,145 GMT at 9.28%. But he noted voters are looking for quick solutions to unemployment, rising cost of living, and limited reach of public services in remote rural areas in the hinterland. In September, government audits revealed that Senegal's debt and budget deficit were much wider than the previous administration had reported. A $1.9 billion IMF program agreed in June 2023 has been on hold since. Somaliland opposition leader Abdurrahman Chiro defeated incumbent President Musa Bihi Abdi in last week's election, said on Tuesday, setting up a leadership change as the breakaway Somali region pushes for global recognition. Somaliland has had de facto cease rule. Several leading African policy officials from Trump's first term have voiced support for recognizing Somaliland. Somaliland has enjoyed a comparative period of peace since achieving autonomy 3 decades ago, just as Somalia plunged into a civil war from which it has yet to emerge. While Chiro has signaled broad support for the preliminary pact with Ethiopia, his commitment to implementing it is not clear. Some analysts suspect he could be more open to dialogue with Somalia's government, which opposes the agreement. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Monday lives should not be put at risk in a standoff between police and hundreds of illegal miners stuck underground in a disused mine shaft, and the miners should be recovered safely. The police have blocked miners' supplies of food and water to force them out and arrest them for illegally entering the abandoned mine in Northwest Province in search of leftover gold, an issue that has plagued South Africa for decades. More than 1,000 illegal miners have resurfaced in recent weeks, but police said last week that hundreds could still be underground. Local residents and human rights groups have criticized authorities for blocking the supplies. In a weekly newsletter, Ramaphosa said the situation was precarious and could potentially turn volatile. Ramaphosa urged the police to respect the miners' rights and not put their lives at risk, and said his government would work with the mining industry on the issue of illegal mining. O'Malley told President Joe Biden he would resign effective November 29, the New York Times reported. We must connect our party with the most important place in America, the kitchen table of every family's home: jobs, opportunity, and economic security for all. Getting things done, hope. A 50-state strategy now, O'Malley said in a post on X. O'Malley, who mounted a short-lived presidential campaign in 2016, ran for DNC chair after Hillary Clinton's defeat to Donald Trump, but lost out to Tom Perez, who held the role from 2017 to 2021. O'Malley is the first candidate to openly seek the DNC leadership spot as the party tries to reshape itself after the brazen 2024 presidential loss and Republicans' takeover of both chambers of Congress. Other contenders for the DNC post include Ben Wickler, head of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Minnesota Democratic Party Chief Ken Martin, close Biden aide Mitch Landrieu, also a former New Orleans mayor, and Senator LaFonza Butler of California, who was appointed to fill the seat of late Senator Dianne Feinstein in 2023, and choose not to run for a full term this year. Current DNC Chairman Jaime Harrison of South Carolina is not expected to seek a second term after this decisive defeat of Vice President Kamala Harris by Republican Donald Trump this month raised questions about the future direction of the Democratic Party. U.S. Supreme Court declined on Monday to hear a challenge based on constitutional free speech protections to a voter-approved measure in Alaska that requires greater public disclosure of certain political donations, as the justices passed up a chance to further curtail campaign finance regulation. The Justices turned away an appeal by several Askan residents and advocacy groups represented by a conservative legal group of lower courts ruling upholding the law narrowly approved as a ballot initiative in 2020. The initiative, called Ballot Measure 2, adopted sweeping changes to the state's election system. The plaintiffs objected to what they called some of the most stringent disclosure requirements in the United States on political donors. The voters adopted a non-partisan open primary system, a method called ranked choice voting for the general elections in which voters rank candidates in order of preference, and a series of changes to Alaska's campaign finance laws to address the use of dark money in elections. The term dark money generally refers to election spending by certain organizations that do not disclose the identity of their donors, leaving voters in the dark as to who is trying to influence them. The case before the U.S. Supreme Court, pursued by the conservative legal group Liberty Justice Center, involved only a challenge to the campaign finance requirements of the Alaska measure. The plaintiffs argue that the Alaska disclosure requirements violates the rights of donors under the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment, which protects against governmental abridgment of free speech. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said on Monday that he is nominating former Wisconsin representative and Fox Business News host Sean Duffy to be Transportation Secretary. If confirmed, Duffy will oversee aviation, automotive, rail, transit, and other transportation policies at the department, with about a $110 billion budget, as well as significant funding that remains under the Biden administration's 2021 $1 trillion infrastructure law and EV charging stations. Trump has vowed to reverse the Biden administration's vehicle emissions rules. He has said he plans to begin the process of undoing the Biden administration's stringent emissions regulations finalized earlier this year as soon as it takes office. The rules cut tailpipe emissions limits by 50% from 2026 levels by 2032 and prod automakers to build more EVs. Duffy will face a number of major transportation issues. U.S. traffic deaths have fallen this year but still remain sharply above pre-COVID levels. The fatalities serve our economy without compromising our national security. Duffy will also be in charge of oversight of companies run by Elon Musk, who has been closely involved in Trump's transition. United States Department of Agriculture confirmed the presence of bird flu in Hawaii on Monday, the first case of the virus in a domestic flock in the state since the current outbreak began in 2022. The USDA said samples from the flock were tested at the Hawaii State Laboratories Division, part of the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, and confirmed at the agency's National Veterinary Services Laboratories in Ames, Iowa. Argentina has notified the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon that it is withdrawing 3 of its officers go back, said Andre Tenti, UNIFIL spokesperson, in response to a question about a newspaper report. He declined to comment on the reason for their departure, referring the question to the Argentinian government. United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said on Tuesday that the U.S. alliance with the Philippines would transcend changes in administrations as he reiterated his support for the Southeast Asian nation. The Philippines will remain an important country for the United States for many years, Austin told a press conference during a visit to the Philippines. Militaries will listen command on the island of Palawan next to the South China Sea. Both Austin and Philippine counterparts Gilberto Tedro expressed concerns over China's conduct in the South China Sea, with the Pentagon chief reiterating Washington's defense commitments to the Philippines under 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. Austin said the treaty would also cover armed attack in the South China Sea, where he said China had used dangerous and escalatory measures to try to assert its expansive claims. The Philippines and China have been embroiled in repeated spats in the past few years over disputed futures within Manila's exclusive economic zone, sparking regional concerns about a miscalculation and escalation at sea. China claims sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, a conduit for more than $3 trillion in annual shipborne commerce, putting it at odds with its Southeast Asian neighbors. Former Salvadoran President Alfredo Cristiani will be tried in absentia alongside a group of military officials for the murder of 6 Jesuit priests in 1989 during the Civil War, according to an order issued by a San Salvador court. Mr. Cristiani and the others involved will go to trial at an unspecified date in a case concerning the murder of the Jesuit priest under the order of the Second Examining Court of the capital, San Salvador, said Attorney Gabriel Solorzano to the press November 18th after a preliminary hearing. On November 16th, 1989, during the Salvadoran Civil War, soldiers from the Atzlacati Battalion stormed the campus of the Central American University, a Jesuit institution, killing the priest and 2 staff members, the cook, and her daughter. The Jesuits Ignacio Elacuria, Ignacio Martin Barro, Segundo Montes, Juan Ramon Moreno, Joaquin Lopez, and Amado Lopez taught at the university and its associated institutes. Alba Ramos cooked meals at the Jesuit community. Celia is her 16-year-old daughter. Alfredo Cristiani, now 76 years, was president and thus commander of the country's armed forces at the time. An arrest warrant was issued for him in March 2022 when the case was reopened, but his current whereabouts are unknown. You're watching the international news in Atlantic Television Network. Still ahead, mass production of mobile bomb shelters begins in Russia. We'll be back after this break to stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching the broadcast of the international news in Atlantic Television Network. Remember, we're open for adverts, placements, bookings, and commercials, and you can connect with us and watch us on ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network. Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, X formerly Twitter at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website www.atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. reporters that the call with Trump was very friendly and very productive, and said he planned to see Trump as soon as he could. I think President-elect Trump was happy to hear from the Philippines, said Marcos, whose 2-year-old administration has strengthened Manila's defense relationship with Washington. Countries face common security challenges in the region. Marcos has started to ties that trade under the former U.S. colony is seen as central to Washington's efforts to counter China's increasingly assertive policies China Sea in towards Taiwan. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Tuesday the 2 Hyundai researchers and 1 Hyundai contractor were found unconscious in a car at around 3 p.m. while they were testing it in a chamber, according to Hyundai's labor union. Media reports say the 3 had suffocated. A police officer in Ulsan said the police and the labor ministry were investigating the incident, including its cause. Fire department officials told newsmen that it first received a report at 3:17 p.m. that the accident happened at Hyundai's number 4 factory. Hyundai Motor Company is deeply saddened by the incident that occurred at our plant in Ulsan, South Korea. Hyundai production capacity of 1.4 million vehicles, including exports of 1.1 million units. South Korea's main opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung, was indicted on Tuesday on charges alleging he used more than 100 million won of public funds for personal purposes when he was a governor, Yonhap News Agency reported. Lee, chair of the Democratic Party, is already facing 4 other trials, including for bribery and other charges mostly tied to a $1 billion property development scandal. His legal battles have cast a cloud over his political fate and could jeopardize his expected bid to contest the next presidential race. Prosecutors indicted Lee on breach of trust charges, accusing him of misusing some 106 million won in taxpayers' money during his 2018 to 2021 stints as governor of Gyeonggi Province, just south of Seoul, according to Yonhap. The charges also include accusations that he allowed his wife Kim Hae-kyung to use a government vehicle for private reasons while labeling it as official usage, Yonhap said, citing the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office, which filed the charges. Funds were also spent to pay for pricey meals, groceries, or laundry for Lee's family, but documented as expenses for meetings with public employees or overtime pay, Yonhap said. Lee, who narrowly lost to President Yoon Suk-yeol in the 2022 election and is widely expected to seek to run again in 2027, has not publicly commented on the latest indictment, but has previously denied any wrongdoing and described other charges against the couple as political retaliation. The Democratic Party on Tuesday condemned the indictment as far-fetched and a scheme to kill the presidential's political foe. Russia has arrested 2 suspects believed to be behind the assassination of a senior naval officer who was killed by a car bomb in Crimea last week, investigators said on Tuesday. Valery Trankovsky, a naval captain and the chief of staff of the 41st Brigade of Russia's missile ships in the Black Sea, died in a black saloon car that was blown up in the city of Sevastopol. A source in the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, told newsmen at the time that it was responsible for the operation, describing Trankovsky as one of the most senior Russian officials that Kyiv has targeted in this way. Russia's State Investigative Committee said the two suspects were a 47-year-old man accused of making and detonating the bomb and a 38-year-old woman who it said had carried out surveillance on the target. In a video published by Russian military news outlet Vesda, the pair was shown confessing to the crime. The man said he had been recruited by the SBU in the summer of 2023 and given a task of liquidating a high-ranking military officer. The faces were blurred out in the video, and it was not clear if they were speaking freely or under duress. Crimea, which Russia seized and unilaterally annexed from Ukraine in 2014, provides the base for Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Several Russian pro-war figures have been assassinated since the start of the war in operations blamed by Moscow on Ukraine. United States envoy returned to Beirut on Tuesday, where Lebanese officials have tentatively welcomed a proposal for an Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire. There was no such optimism in the Gaza Strip, where the mass looting of 8 trucks by armed men worsened an already severe food crisis. Amos Hochstein, the Biden administration's point man on Israel and Lebanon, arrived as Hezbollah's allies in the Lebanese government, said it had responded positively to the proposal, which would entail both the militants and Israeli ground forces withdrawing from a UN buffer zone in southern Lebanon. It's unclear how close they are to clinching an agreement. The buffer zone would be policed by thousands of additional UN peacekeepers and Lebanese troops. Israel has called for a stronger enforcement mechanism, potentially including the ability to operate against any Hezbollah threats, something Lebanon is likely to oppose. In Gaza, meanwhile, the theft of nearly 100 trucks loaded with food and other humanitarian aid over the weekend sent prices soaring and cost shortages in central Gaza, where most of the population of 2.3 million people have fled and where hundreds of thousands are crammed into squalid tent camps. UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric said the convoy of 109 trucks was instructed by the Israeli military to take an alternative, unfamiliar route after the aid was brought in through the Kerem Shalom crossing, and thus the trucks were stolen near the crossing itself. Russia has begun mass production of mobile bomb shelters that can protect against a variety of man-made threats and natural disasters, including radiation and shockwaves, the Emergency Ministries Research Institute said. The KUBM shelter looks like a reinforced shipping container. It can give some protection against radiation, shrapnel, debris, and fires, and can be deployed in Russia's vast northern permafrost, according to the State Institute. The standard unit accommodates 54 people, but additional modules can be added, the institute said. The war in Ukraine is entering what some officials say could be its final, most dangerous phase as Moscow's forces advance at their fastest pace since the early weeks of the conflict in 2022, and the West seeks to shore up Ukraine. The institute did not link the move to any current crisis, though the announcement came just as the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden agreed to allow Ukraine to fire American long-range missiles deep into Russia. The Kremlin said on Monday that Russia would respond to what it called a reckless decision by Biden's administration, and cautioned that the move would draw the United States directly into the conflict. Kyiv's military said on Tuesday it struck a large Russian weapons depot near the town of Globa in the Bryansk region that lies over 110 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. The attack was followed by 12 secondary explosions and detonations in the area of the strike. the Ukrainian military's general staff said in a statement on the Telegram app. The destruction of ammunition depots will continue for the army of the Russian occupiers in order to stop the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, it said. Russia's defense ministry said its forces destroyed 12 Ukrainian drones a.m. and 4 more between 9:10 a.m. and 9:20 a.m. Ukraine often uses domestically produced drones to hit targets deep inside Russia. The military did not specify which weapon had been used for the strike. Kyiv was granted permission by the White House earlier this week to use U.S.-supplied weapons to strike deep into Russia. Newsmen reported, citing sources saying that Kyiv would begin the strikes in the coming days. There was no immediate indication that U.S. weapons were used on the arsenal in Kharkiv. Police in Georgia's capital early on Tuesday moved in to break up a tent camp that demonstrators set up on a central thoroughfare to protest the results of last month's parliamentary election and demand a no vote. The October 26 election kept the governing Georgian Dream Party in power, but opponents say the vote was rigged. Many Georgians viewed the election as a referendum on the country's efforts to join the European Union. Several large protests have been held since then. Protesters had set up the tent camp in Tbilisi, the capital, and are allowed to stay around the clock to demand new parliamentary elections. As police moved to disperse it, there were scuffles and several protesters were detained. According to an Associated Press reporter at the scene, some of the demonstrators were displaying European Union flags. Eleni Kostaria, leader of Coalition for Change, which unites several opposition parties, vowed to continue the protest, telling newsmen, "There was absolutely no reason for dispersal, but it will not stop our resistance. It is the mistake, the weakness, and they will pay the price for it. We will continue to resist." President Salome Zourabichvili, who has rejected the official results on Tuesday, filed a lawsuit to the Constitutional Court, arguing that two fundamental principles guaranteed by the Constitution, the secrecy of the vote and its universality, were violated. Zourabichvili, who holds a mostly ceremonial position, has said Georgia has fallen victim to pressure from Moscow against joining the EU. Russian President Vladimir Putin issued a warning to the United States on Tuesday, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike just days after the administration of Joe Biden reportedly allowed Ukraine to fire American missiles deep into Russia. The updated doctrine, formerly known as the Basics of State Policy in the Field of Nuclear Deterrence, outlines the threats that would make Russia, the world's biggest nuclear power, contemplate using such weapons. Russia would consider a nuclear strike if it or its ally, Belarus, faced aggression with the use of conventional weapons that created a critical threat to their sovereignty and or their territorial integrity, the new doctrine said. The previous doctrine, set out in a 2020 decree, said Russia may use nuclear weapons in case of a nuclear attack by an enemy or a conventional attack that threatened the existence of the state. Other innovations included considering any conventional assault on Russia by a non-nuclear power supported by a nuclear power to be a joint attack. Any mass aerospace attack with aircrafts, cruise missiles, and unmanned aircrafts that crossed Russia's borders could also trigger a nuclear response. The Kremlin said Russia considered nuclear weapons as a means of deterrence, and that the aim of the updated text was to make absolutely clear to potential enemies that the inevitability of retaliation should they attack Russia. Together, Russia and the U.S. control 88% of the world's nuclear warheads. Putin is Russia's primary decision maker on the use of Russia's nuclear arsenal. Lithuania's Navy said on Tuesday that it had increased monitoring of its waters after an undersea communications cable connecting the country with Sweden had been damaged. An assessment is now being carried out along with allies, a spokesperson for the Lithuanian Armed Forces told newsmen. The cable was one of two fiber optic cables in the Baltic Sea, which were severed in recent days, raising suspicions of sabotage by bad actors, countries and companies involved, said on Monday. A spokesperson for Aeriline, the owner and operator of the communications cable, told newsmen on Tuesday that the link between Lithuania and Sweden was fully out, but that the reason remained unclear. And that's the size of our package on the international news for today. Before we go, let's take a look at the major headlines.